This is what your financial statement is going to look like by the end of this tutorial after we've done some financial manipulation, some Excel manipulation, and you'll notice that we'll be able to change the year we're looking at just by typing a year in one place and so on. How do we get there? Well, firstly, I just want to remind you that you do need to consider periodically refreshing your data using the Refresh Data button and pulling it from the appropriate company to put in the most current data. The system is not going to automatically do that for you, so you will from time to time want to refresh the data to account for any transactions that have been entered since then. Right, we're now going to talk about a number of techniques that can actually get you from where you were at the end of the basic tutorial to this point. We're going to look at drilling down into details behind a number on one of these financial statements. We're going to look at how we can be a little bit more granular about what accounts we specify and how we group accounts together. And finally, we're going to look at how we can make this report much more flexible by being able to very, very quickly change the fiscal years and potentially the periods that we're reporting on. First one is, let's look at drill downs. Any of the cells in which we're using this BLFS formula to return a value from our general ledger can be drilled down into to find out what accounts are behind it. So for example, this sales line is using all accounts that begin with the number 4. For period, let's say for period 3, for example, if I want to see what the actual accounts are and the amounts that make up this balance of 13,231, I can click on drill into selection and the screen will pop up. I'll just recenter it slightly. And the screen will pop up that lists all the accounts over here that make up that amount. Note that I can resize this if I want to be able to see all the accounts. These are the amounts that make up that 13,231, which is the rounded number. So this is the actual number with pennies. What I can do, the highlighted account, as you can see by this little sign on the left-hand side, in the top half, shows me the actual individual transactions in the bottom half. And you can resize the screen, you can make it bigger, you can maximize it, and so on and so forth. If I click on one of the other lines, like let's say this line, count 4100, now I see the transactions that make up that amount of 8304.60. So you've got to drill down to the actual transactions. While we're on the pop-up screen, and again, you can just do the same thing on any one of the other lines as well. While we're on the pop-up screen, 3 little tools that you can use that are pretty cool on this pop-up screen. The first thing is, you'll notice that we've got a sort sequence designated by these little sort of pyramids next to each account here, where we've sorted in ascending order by account, department, job code, and cost code. And in the bottom section, the transactions are sorted by date. You can change the sort sequence by clicking on any one of the heading rows. So if we were interested in seeing, for example, the smallest to biggest number, I could click on on amount, and the initial thing will show me actually biggest to smallest. Click again, and now it's smallest to biggest. Same thing over here. If I wanted to look at things sorted by reference number, click on there, I'm sorting by reference number, and click again this way, and I'm sorting by reference number in reverse order. So you can do that with any column. You can also filter transactions. So for example, if I wanted to only see transactions or accounts actually, so any of these columns can also be filtered. So if I was only interested, for example, in seeing accounts that were for, let's say, the East department, I could click on there and select East. You also, on these filter things, have more options as well. So you can use fancy formulae and so on. And then if I click on filter, it's now going to change the display to only show me the East department in this particular case. And if I want to revert to seeing all departments, I simply click on the filter button again. I can just say select all. Whoops, let's just make sure that all is actually selected, and then we're done. And now it's showing all of them. Final thing you can do on the pop-up is you can actually select any of the data, and there's a practical reason why we may want to do that, which I will show you immediately after this. But we can select any of the data and copy it to the clipboard. So if I could, for example, if I wanted to, I could just select these cells and copy them to the clipboard. But more realistically, what I may want to do is I may want to grab, let's say, all of these rows and copy them to the clipboard. So all you need to do in order to do that is to highlight what you want to select out of either the top grid or the second grid, and then hit Control-C. Control key on your keyboard and C, which copies that to the clipboard. Now let's see what we could do with that once we've copied it to the clipboard. I've scrolled to a different part of the sheet a little bit further down on my sheet, and now using the Windows paste key, which is Control-V, I can actually paste this information into the into the spreadsheet. Now, again, you may say, what's the value of that, or what's the use of that? Well, if you wanted to get a more detailed financial statement, and you'd probably be more likely to do this with expenses than with income now that I think about it, but nevertheless, then this is a real quick shortcut way of doing this. So I'll delete the superfluous information that I don't care about, but I've got the account numbers, the departments, and the account descriptions here. I can simply copy those wild cards for job code and cost code and paste them in here. And now I can grab our BLFS formula, copy it there and paste it here. And now it's going to give me the value for that one specific account. Now again, I may want to reverse the sign because these are going to be revenue accounts. And then I can simply copy that formula down and across. So I can copy it down, and then I can copy it all the way across. And now I've created a detail section in our financial statement for the revenue. So it's as easy as that to use the copy and paste to create a more detailed version of your statement. Now this leads nicely into the next section, which is how do we specify more granular or different groupings of accounts. So you'll see that we have two examples here. We have, for example, just show me all accounts that begin with 6, no matter what departments, job codes, or cost codes they are. And then we're seeing for here, for example, individual accounts and departments, and it's respecting those individual accounts and departments. We can get variations on that. So let's just say, for example, I wanted to aggregate sales of kitchen tools and sales of accessories in a single sales line. There are a number of ways I can do that. I'm just going to expand the width of column A so it's going to be easier for you to see what I'm doing. And what I can do is I can say, so what I'll do is maybe I'll copy an existing line. So maybe I'll copy the existing revenue line from here initially. And I'll paste it in down here. And then what I'll do is I'll change the syntax, and the user guide does give you the syntax, so I'm not going to get into too much details, but anytime you want to group or combine accounts or specify more than either a single account or a wildcard, you'd enclose it in square brackets. So I can say, give me account number 41000, comma 42000. This means take those two accounts, and now it's going to add those two accounts together, and you can do the math on screen in your head, and you can see that it actually does work. It's aggregated those two accounts together. Now what I could also do is I could specify a range of accounts. So if, for example, what I really wanted was to get all the way from account 41,000 to 44,400, so in other words, I'm just excluding the first two, I could simply change that to say, again in square brackets, 41000 dash, let's say 45000, which would encompass all of that. So that's now going to aggregate all accounts that would fall within this range. So the dash means the entire range. I can combine those concepts. So what I could also do is I could go in here and say, but I also want to add on to that one account number 40000, which means we're really just excluding 40500, and that'll work as well. And the final thing that I wanted to point out to you is you can also exclude accounts from a range. So let's just say I wanted to create a range that was all my revenue accounts from 4 all the way to 45000, but I wanted to exclude number 42,000 / 42,000 will include all the accounts except 42,000. And of course, in each of these cases, I have actually aggregated, I've included all departments. The same techniques that you've seen here me using for accounts can be used for departments as well as job codes and cost codes. You can use the same syntax, the square brackets, etc., to group different departments together and so on. So just to remind you, the syntax rules behind grouping accounts together, etc., are detailed in the user guide. Please feel free to refer to that. The final advanced technique we're going to deal with here is how to make your reports even more powerful and flexible by being able to hot swap years and potentially periods and even other aspects of the report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a couple of rows just to make space to do what I want to do. And maybe I'll say here fiscal year or year or initial year or whatever. And down here I'm going to put an initial year. I'm going to format this so that it looks a little bit nicer. So I'm going to maybe make this both be left justified, let's say And I don't know, let's make it a nice blue background and a nice white font, just to make it stand out. Maybe make it bold. Yeah, I mean, I'm not the greatest designer in terms of choosing appropriate colors, but now what I can do is I can change the year from an absolute year. I've got absolute years here. I could say this equals that column, and I'm simply going to use my F4 key to make that an absolute cell address. So the dollar signs mean it's an absolute address, which means when I now copy this across to all the other columns, and I am going to do all the other columns, each of these columns are simply pointing to the same cell, to E7. And with the last one, because I wanted last year to date, I'm going to say -1. So now we've reverted to exactly what we had before, except these are now formulae. Now what this means is, if I change the fiscal year to 2017, it rolls all the way through the statement, including changing the previous year to date display to 2016. Now what I can do as a final little way of making the statement look really much better is I could, for example, create a little bit of a heading structure at the top. So I'm going to show you part of it quickly, and then I'm going to just do the rest of it behind the scenes. So I'm creating a formula that copies the period for each column. Okay, and voila, I've added a little bit of formatting and some other labels. And now what we do to finish off the report and make it look really, really good is we hide the columns and rows that we don't care about. Best way to do that is select those columns, click on data, click on group. You'll notice a little minus sign appears here. Click the minus sign, it collapses those columns. Do the same thing with the rows. Get rid of the upper rows that we don't care about. Again, data, group. I just realized that you couldn't see the group icon that I was clicking on the data ribbon. I will show that to you in a moment, but we get the same thing here. We simply do that. So just moving the part that I'm showing you so that you can actually see the group icon. There it is. It's this icon over here. So now we have a financial statement that looks really like a financial statement. I guess it would probably look more so if I actually got rid of these details because they kind of don't really work so well. But there's a really, really reasonably attractive financial statement. And although it took me about 15 minutes to build it in this particular tutorial because I was explaining as I go along, I think you'll find that if you do this from scratch once you practiced, this takes me roughly around about 2 to maybe 2.5 minutes to get from a blank screen to this kind of statement. And then obviously from there we can build out more details, sections with expense details and so on.